it's not like there's something you're missing per se. Like if you just would have done this or would have done that or would have followed that, it's like, no, where you are right now is always, always the perfect place, the perfect challenge. Hey!
Ed, my man.
So can you hear me okay without, I don't need any like headphones or anything like that, do I?
You need nothing. You're perfect the way you are.
Do you see how I've dropped in virtually from another virtual location?
No, you're not. You're sat on a rock in the middle of the outback
Joshua
somewhere.
Tree.
Joshua
Yeah.
Tree.
Yeah, my wife and I were there about, it was about a month ago now. Yeah, we got back on October 1st. A lot's been going on since then, but that's a really cool place in, it's Southern California, desert.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like just amazing, amazing rocks everywhere. And
Wow.
so I got some good photos of hanging out there. We turned it into like we got to take pictures for our sandal catalog. So I was like, okay, let's design a trip and go for it and see what happens. And so it was awesome.
Nice. And it performed, clearly. Did you take the pictures?
Well, we took lots of pictures. There's some of me. Let's see, how do I get it around?
Oh, you're in the back there.
There I am. That's one. I mean, I've got all kinds of pictures. Like, here's my picture of man. I mean, I was playing around,
amazing,
trying to see how do I like take some of these pictures and add them to it. You know, like when you're. Of course, this one's not, but I like this too. I'm having so much fun. I haven't really played around with Zoom that much. But I started getting the idea that it would be fun to come up with some I mean, I'm sure everybody and their brothers come up with every kind of thing, but I haven't really played much with it. So I started
you're like
thinking,
a hologram now.
More. So I'm afraid you're part of my playscape today.
Oh mate, I'm happy to be in that space. That picture reminded me actually of when I was in India last year, and I completely forgot, and it's so relevant, really. I had these New Balance. What are they called? The New Balance Minimus.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I had those. They were like my first kind of barefoot running shoe, and I was in India, and they were kind of all I could afford, really. I couldn't afford a second pair. Yeah, this is going back nearly 2 years ago, and then I was in India, and they were just falling apart, and I mean, like broken. And I went. And that was, I don't know, after a year of like wearing them like every day. And then I went to this guy on the street, and they obviously have cobblers, we'd call them over here, but you know, they have people, and then their job's just to fix and repair shoes and clothes, just like that picture. And I came back. I mean, I'm walking the streets barefoot. I came back half an hour later, and he polished the rubber. He like threaded through like the laces and tied up with like some proper stitching, tied up the holes. And I was just like, wow, amazing. Like you've just saved me throwing them away and doing another pair. And it's just like, what is the disconnect over here? It's actually cheaper over here to buy a new pair than to get them repaired.
Yes, I know. There's something. Anyway, we are in a very odd and interesting world, and I'll tell you, just like any part of anything, depending on what area you're looking at or focusing on, and what your attitude about how you're investigating will end up helping you discover all the things that you might end up enjoying life with, or wishing you hadn't even been born. It's an amazing array of the 1,000 beautifuls and the 1,000 uglies, the 10,000 beautifuls, the 10,000 uglies, whatever it is. Yeah. What an amazing journey. So I'm super stoked. I took I'm, as you can tell through your interactions with me, trying to get me to be here right now, is like, I'm not a extraordinarily dutiful person when I'm overly busy already. In other words, I don't even hardly give time to myself, but I try to find that balance, right? In other words, in the hurricane of all the things going on. And I think that's what your first 30 days of the year or whatever, like learning the hot and the cold, and being able to get into that space of discomfort, and then stepping back and realizing that actually how I approach this is how it's going to affect me, or there's something to be said about the building up of dealing with hardship or difficulty by staying calm first, and then being able to continue to breathe, and by being able to stay present, and then it's like an alchemy, and suddenly it's like what was supposed to be causing you distress. I think that cold is a really good, direct teacher. That you don't even need any words. It's teaching you. It's like, but that's the underlying spirit of it. The more I can, and all these different teachers throughout all time continuously are coming back to that place where it's like, if you're breathing and you're staying present, and you're witnessing without any judgment, let's say. I mean, that's getting too complicated, but you know what I mean? Cold does it. You don't need any words. Bam. There you go.
Yeah.
And then this sort of like the other alchemical part of it is there's a vitalizing that comes from something that's so freaking basic. Hot and cold. Take your shoe off. Walk a little bit. Wow, I feel the ground. Breathe the air. Look at the world. It's like these simple, basic things that we have available to us as a species that is always there ready for us to partake of. And it's basically just attitude, and permission. So Barefoot Ted is about giving people courage to have the attitude, and giving them the permission to explore the world in a way that by doing so will be making them better, stronger, happier, healthier, more capable of externalizing a better world through their actions than the other option is get in that cold water and miserable until you drown. I'm taking the opposite. I think you did too. So I like your style.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important, isn't it? To empower someone, you do just need to hold the space. And that's clearly what you're tapping into there, because we often do need permission. We feel like it's out of our control and we need someone to control it for us. But then the thing you realize, and that's why lots of people in kind of the self-help, the world of self-development, often go off and to help others in that capacity, because they realize, well, God, I just need to teach people how to empower themselves through their own like individuality and self-worth, all of it. So yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, I see that even in your background there. What does it say on your poster back there? I like that. What's that say?
Spread your wings, live your dreams.
Okay, so that's another. I mean, it's an underlying. There's one guy I want to. By the way, we're recording something now?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, cool. Because I want to. I mean, you're gonna go through an introduction and all that, or I'm sure I don't have.
I mean, you're saving me the job to set you up. Everyone knows who you are. Who listens to me.
Okay, cool. It doesn't even matter.
No.
But that being said, there isn't. What I love about what your that poster says, it ties in so clearly. By the way, let me turn this off so you can see. In my background here, I've got above me here a drawing of me when I'm 5 or 6 or something like that. It's 1972, but the picture's from 1971. And that character, that child version of me, I have hanging above me here because, that represents 50 years plus of being an individual and thinking about what the future could be like, what is the world about. And that period, 1970, 71, was a very, for me, it was a very awesome period. Many incredible things had happened just very recently in human history, like, the landing on the moon. That was a big deal. In the United States, that represented something very powerful because the words of the some of the first astronauts like Neil Armstrong and others, there was something about this poignancy of like, we are all part of this together. You know, looking back, you know, it was a very well orchestrated story about human connection and peace and this new era that was coming, that we can overcome any obstacle. So I was a very optimistic 6-year-old. And I was very stunned and fascinated by this potential future world that was coming, that was going to be so interesting, that had to do with computers and technology and communication. And indeed, even this kind of interaction, I could, in the late 60s, as a kid, I was paying attention to I had an aunt who was letting me just dream up like crazy stories about what the future would be like. And I was being told by everybody how important computers were going to be in the future. And so therefore I wanted to sort of, you know, wrestle with that idea and what did that mean? And it's the thing that it really meant ultimately was we were going to be given a tool that was going to allow us to share an experience with others all over the world in a way that we are right now. This broadens our experience radically. This allows us to step into a, you know, there was a character called Gumby. It was an animation character that I was growing up as a kid, and he could just like, he could, it was the adventures of Gumby, and he could like go into books and travel around and sort of do what we're doing. So imagining what a tool like that would be like in the future, and this concept of peace and this recognition of connectedness of everybody, to me, that led for a very optimistic future. And right about that time was also the technology in, of course, that came much later, by the way. What I expected the computers to be like and how long it took for them to be like that was, you know, some time into the future. But other little hints started popping in too. In Southern California, let's say, culture, and that was the real impact of surfing and skateboard culture, which was really had a huge impact on my life. And but, no pun intended, but back in the early days, we felt like true pioneers, adventuring out into a world that had never been experienced like this before, particularly skateboarding, right? And the surf, many of the companies and the culture and everything was in Southern California. And indeed, as I talk about a lot in some other writings I've done and stuff, one of the brands that was super important for me to do it as a kid was this one called Hang 10. It's a shirt, it has 2 golden feet embroidered on the, instead of, you know, whatever, instead of like an alligator or a polo guy, it was 2 golden feet. And that was, the feet ended up becoming clearly the interface between this new technology, quote unquote, the skateboard, and an old technology, right, the barefoot, and that state that we can get in that requires outdoor and skill set and shared experience and no points. We were just like crazy, and it sort of gave us an excuse. And somehow it also made us to be a little bit sort of like delinquents, because the parents were very concerned about us doing these various things, and we were getting injured and we were breaking into, you know, we were trying to find dried out swimming pools and going where it said no trespassing. That we just never believed that it could possibly be okay to tell people they can't do something when they knew they could do it and nobody was going to be bothered but themselves. We had this underlying sort of anarchistical sort of like, you can't say no to us on this. Like there'd be a fence and there's like a beautiful open area for skateboarding. You know, it'd be, if there was a flood, that would be a place where waters would go, but it was clearly not flooding. Nobody was going to be hurt. We could not help but climb that wall. If there was a dried out swimming pool, we could not help but, and so many things about, I mean, there's a line, right? I mean, obviously I don't want people to be lawbreakers, and I certainly don't want people to be, I didn't want to grow up to be such a law-breaking little renegade, but it gave me the confidence to know as I got older and could make better judgments about what would be good or not. It just helped me develop an attitude that says, there's no expert who is going to be able to do more than me, myself, to understand what it is that makes, and this is back to your poster now, makes me come alive, fascinates me, turns me on, gets my focus. Because, and now I finally can say the quote from this guy named Howard Thurman that connects to your poster. Howard Thurman is this unique figure in the American spiritual tradition. He's actually a Baptist mystic. It's an absolute impossible construct, but he's that. And he was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mentor. He was actually grew up in a segregated part of Florida in the turn of the last century, but through his experiences, primarily deep spiritual experiences, just being out in nature, buying some kind of, and then going into a spiritual tradition. This happened to be a Baptist tradition that was giving a lot of scholarships. He got a scholarship to high school, went to a great college, learned how to be a great orator, but ultimately through his experiences becomes a mystic being, you know, outside of the parameters of being able to put a label on, because once they've had this experience of this oneness or this connection to everything, they are no longer feeling like there's the quality of like, yes, no, do this, do that, or they understand that by a relationship to this kind of oneness, more often than not, they're probably going to do the right thing just by following their heart. So he says this. He says, don't ask what the world needs. Instead, ask what makes you come alive and do it. Because what the world needs are people who have come alive. And I just dig that idea that people's own solving of the riddle of themselves is their great privilege and opportunity to discover what is it in them that is going to solve problems for themselves and thus for others too, in a sense, because as each one of us sort of figures out the riddle and gets hints from teachers and insights and books and people and experiences and the wrong path, and in the end, that constant process is the process that is allowing us, in my opinion, to evolve as a group, as a species, as a world, as a kind of a divine presence, let's say. And so, and I've been riffing on this idea that our experience and our setbacks and our opportunities and the growth and all these different teachers from all these different traditions, in the end, one way I've been recently seeing it is that literally, if we live presently, if we live from that space of the witness, let's say, that's underneath it all, everything, the exhilaration of living well is that your life is like revelation, right? It's never been before. And here it is becoming now. And if you're there watching it, being part of it, active in it, and shaping it in some way, it becomes more like music or a harmony than some kind of equation. And if you can stay in the flow of it, every single time, if you can get back into your breath, and this is getting back to the water and its lesson, if you can all get back there into that process, the process of it is always, you're always back up. And if you start breathing again, you know, here comes another wave. And it's just this endless perfecting of being vital and healthy and feeling good and having that infectious sort of magnetic sort of quality influencing the world around you, but starting from your own heart, from your own insights, from your own like impossible to fake, let's say, you, and then out. I love that process because it ultimately empowers everyone to realize that whatever it is that you are right now, it's marvelous, it's fantastic, even in its tragedy. If you can regain composure at that very moment that serenity returns, you're going to be able to make better decisions. You're going to be able to, on a more optimistic path. You're going to find a solution where there was a problem, but only when and if you're willing to get back to that place where you're okay, you're breathing, you're serene. So there's how you start with Barefoot Ted, a crazy monologue per usual.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And I think what you tapped into there, you tapped into the philosophy of Barefoot Ted's adventures. And also that I just want to add that collective unconscious that you can tap into when you reach a sense of oneness, your flow state, whatever fills you with like the richness and the timelessness of that flow state. You tap into it and you almost submerge yourself into what you could call a collective unconscious. And there's nothing within that really wants to make you distant from everyone else. So I was kind of thinking when you were discussing it, I was like, it's exactly it, because no one would want to disconnect themselves to everyone else around them. When you fulfill yourself in that rich state of play and flow, you want everyone else to kind of be a part of it also. So you're tapping into that kind of like that oneness. It's beautiful.
Well, and then there's been traditionally, it may be something that's kind of lacking in some sense. Like, in other words, so many, well, one thing I also really am, as you got a sense of in sort of the Barefoot Ted's Adventures philosophy, is there's a kind of a unwillingness to be encapsulated, forced into a position, made to acknowledge whatever the truth is by whoever the authorities are. There's an underlying unwillingness to be able to just do what you're supposed to do because you're being told to do it by somebody of authority. It's not good enough for me, for my style of thinking. So I'm definitely a more along a jester, in the sense that I want people to not overly lose control of their own self. They have something to contribute. I'm really a strong proponent of suggesting that each individual is coming up with and is on their own road of solving the mystery of who they are, their road to enlightenment, whatever it is. And there's going to be all kinds of different styles and ways of it being. Ultimately, though, the philosophy that attracts me the most is the one that, at least this time in my life, is the one that is seeing how each one of us, the uniqueness of being an individual is that the universe is just that complex, that each one of us is on a unique and amazing trajectory that is going to teach us everything we're ever going to learn in this lifetime. And who knows what, it starts getting, as you have these different kinds of experiences that begin to give you these glimpses into something more powerful than maybe whatever it is that you thought was before. I think we're going to always have some experiences like this, each of us. Hopefully, though, I guess the great barometer of determining if you're on the right path is self-reporting will have a lot to do with it. Like, in other words, to yourself, but, are you getting somewhere? And I think when you know that you are, whether it's in your physical, mental, or spiritual life, when you start having strategies that start working, and you're discovering them through your interactions with the world and the people that are in your world who are going to be your teacher, your friend, the person who's going to give you some insight, then that's very empowering, because it's not like there's something you're missing per se. Like, if you just would have done this or would have done that or would have followed that, it's like, no, where you are right now is always the perfect place, the perfect challenge to see what you're going to do next, see where you're going to do it, how you're going to interpret what you've done up until now newly. What new insight are you going to find inside yourself from all those collective experiences, both from yourself and through others that you've developed a trust or connection to. So we're in that game too. And indeed, here we are in living color, seeing it happen too.
Yeah. And I think that the lessons that you need, and I spoke about this on another podcast, but the lessons that you need present themselves all the time. Like, they're the exact lessons that you need in that moment, right?
It's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good, of course, until it's not. And then you have to go through your belly of the whale experiences. You have to go through as good as it's always getting. And I think most people, you know, if they can, when and if they can say that, that means probably something's going well long enough for, so that they could start feeling like, hey, there's some, this is moving this way, and I like that. No matter what, though, there's the shadow, there's the other side, there's the moments where you know, you slip, you fall, you crash, you know, you get devoured or you fall off, you know, and recovering quickly, you know, finding the resiliency through your mental practices, your spiritual practices, your physical practices. These things should be ultimately giving you some kind of resiliency, so that you're always finding yourself, the inertia behind your daily hygienic practices, living practices, carry you through the reverberations and the, you know, I mean, the crazy world that we're in, for example.
Yeah. And
like that keeps you on the right track, even though you have all these underlying, who knows, you know, when you're in the surf, man, suddenly if you're not paying attention, things can go terribly wrong very quickly. So, but if you've been practicing, if you stay calm, if you go back to your fundamentals, if you regain, even if you've been crashed by a wave and you stay calm long enough, you'll eventually rise to the surface again, and you'll be in the sun. There'll be another wave coming, and it might be a great day again.
Yeah, it's rare that the less calm you are, the better it gets. It's usually the more calm you are, the better it gets.
Absolutely.
Is that why they call you? And obviously in the Born to Run book, you were quoted as the Neil Armstrong of 21st century distance running, right?
I forgot about that. That's hilarious. That's
Is that where LUNA came from? I was wondering if that where LUNA came from.
You know, that wasn't my idea, right? That's Chris McDougall writing. I don't want to give myself, but back to the book Born to Run, which is why you know who I am. And many people meet me for the first time in that book. And that book is, and you know, it's now 11 years old, but the story starts really before 2006, and the actual book is about something that happens in 2006. So it's quite, you know, at this point, it's quite a long time ago in my own journey. But it was, I was down in those canyons investigating. At that time, I was fascinated by what I called the natural selection of footwear in human cultures. And I was particularly interested in, at that time, what is possible? What are people today living in bodies, Homo sapiens on this planet today? What are some of the things that are living arts that are still happening, that have been happening for a long period of time? And, you know, as a culture, and I think we're sort of in that, you know, in that area of embodiment, let's say, we have learned a crap ton more in the last 15 years about what it means to be a human being. And I think Born to Run was on that, was one of the, you know, there's always been, by the way, as I do more research, there's always people in the mix who are focusing in on these insights, tapping into this, whoever they are. If they're a human being, these kind of primal experiences come to them. They get it. And I mean, I'm telling you, I was going to be sharing a story about a magazine published in London in the 1890s called Natural Food by an American doctor who started studying primal diets and came to the realization that probably most people need to radically reduce things like wheat and starches and sugar, and probably get to, you know, he's like, in other words, already by making these like concepts of like, hey, we really should start thinking, yada, yada. And so in the last 15 years, for me personally, I've been able to, because of some of the hints, starting with something as basic as barefoot running, and at that time pushing the envelope, like what's possible, how far can we go? These days, I'm far more interested in what, in every aspect of my life, before anything, what's the dosage that is the least amount that delivers the best return? in anything. Food, running, practice, you know, how do you find those sweet spots and stay there? I don't need to know what the heroic dosage is to, you know, for my hygienic purposes. I don't need to ride the big, big waves every day, but I need to be tapping into
the minimum effective dose, right?
I think it's something like that in so many areas of life. And I'm looking for that in many ways. I like pushing the envelope, don't worry. I like heroic doses. Joshua Tree is a heroic dose right there. You know, I like these, but in your daily life, finding a strategy that allows you to find what it is that's going to keep you vital, strong, healthy, and so forth. I am starting, and the barefoot and a little bit of running is an incredibly, and I mean a little bit of running, I'm talking the one, the guy that ended up becoming a mentor that ends up writing get some articles in this London magazine I'm telling you about, 1890s, is a guy named J. William Lloyd. He was
1890s. I thought it was 1990s, but let's reiterate.
1890s, dude. 1890s. 1890s. Okay.
Wow.
So this dude that I have a connection to is named J. William Lloyd, and he was a very. It's a long story, and I need to tell this story someday in the future. I mean, I'm telling a little bit of it right now, obviously, but. He was a very interesting American philosopher, author, who was part of the American tradition. They call it the Transcendentalists. There's people like Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and others who, these are some of the first Americans who start having, I don't know, they're just very broad-minded. They're, you know, for the first time, some of these guys are having access to, you know, Eastern philosophies and just new, so they're very, you know, consider the individual a very important contributor to the greater good of everybody, you know, like supporting and encouraging uniqueness and individual insights. So this is a very, you know, very fits into my philosophy very well. And my background, actually, I'd studied them. So they gave me some insights about, you know, living true, or to, you know, being free to be yourself. Kind of, you know, I obviously don't have any, I'm not asking for a lot of permission. I'm asking for forgiveness at times, but not a lot of permission. So these guys were great. And this guy, J. William Lloyd, was a person who was strongly influenced by those kind of thinkings, but also ended up becoming quite considered to be the next iteration of a philosopher in that tradition, particularly in England, particularly in UK, where there were some, about 100, 150 years ago, 125 years ago, there was some of the American thinkers were like super like fresh, right? You know, it's like, whoa, look at these guys. And so there was and there was some people in England following along those lines too. And so this J. William Lloyd kind of gets famous a little bit in that world. And he studies medicine it was a school of medicine called hygiotherapeutic. Hygiotherapeutics. And there was one hot medical school in New York that was the promulgator of this theory. And it was really about basically, it was a reaction to really terrible medicine during the Civil War. And it basically came to the realization that the best medicine possible is no medicine first. Basically, in the sense of the medicine back then was, you can imagine, I mean, it was like mercury, and there was no dosage, and it was basically, you know, it was, you know, crap. But this guy started researching things like bath and massage and water. It ended up becoming more popular in Germany, and you have like Knepp, I think, and other people that take it on. But that school dies out in the United States, and Lloyd was studying in that school, and as he was about to become a doctor, the guy that started it died, and the school, you know, went out of it. It's like a lost moment in American history. And then medical stuff in the United States became like everywhere, it's primarily not therapeutics or preventative. It's trying to solve problems after, and it gets very complicated, and there's lots of money and specialties and cuttings and drugs and yada yada.
Gets quite corporate, and the only well, the primary thing is to grow as a business, really.
It's kind of like that, and you know, unbelievably, like so many things, it's connected. There's a lot of, let's say, good intentions. Some, like, let's say, great, like, for example, I'll just throw it out there like this. Let's socialize medicine, right? Let's make medicine cheaper so that everybody can have access to it. Let's take that out of the filthy hands of those, you know, and instead, let's let the government get involved in it, and they can support that, and then and then we can have all those drugs and everything much more freely available for everybody to have access to. So it turns out that the thing about health that just can't be socialized is the unique character existing in the body of the person who's got a problem. And their first problem is learning how to be happy and healthy in the vehicle they've been given. And the hints always are going back to things that you can do now without any medicine, any doctor, any nothing. You're going to be better off most of the time just finding a way to live a life every day that is, and they were using this, they called it hygiotherapy. They were really looking for strategies that you could do every day that were simple, fun, and easy, that were going to make it so that you were vital and healthy so that you didn't need a doctor. Now, you give me social medicine like that and I'm all in, because it'll be teaching people to basically get healthy by the simplest things, and you're already doing them, amigo, right? Yeah. But ultimately, there's no pill, there's no efficient way to make it more efficient to get people to be more capable of taking care of themselves, other than certain hints that are available to us that more often than not have been around for a long, long time, and healthy doses of people on the planet today practicing those things exist. You can learn from them. You and I are among them in our giant cohorts of technologically adapted primates, you and I. And this is fabulous that we can share this, but there's many others that haven't gone off on that journey yet. They're still scared, you know, if I don't take their thing or get this or do that, am I going to be in danger? And it's like, look, human beings are robust little things, man. When we are not poisoned in our minds and our bodies, and we can get back into the vehicle and tap into it, damn, you're not going to be scared about your health. Now, the Barefoot is a great place to begin, because I think you can get enough, and I'm back to Lloyd now. I mean, this is how it goes, amigo, sorry. Lloyd basically says, and he writes in that magazine in 1895 in London, here's what he says. Let me see if I can grab. I love this, and it's a great little essay too. And it turns out it's basically like Born to Run, before Born to Run ever was born. He says, interested from boyhood in health topics, I have always wondered at the indifference, general, medical, hygienic, to the exercise which to me seemed to excel all others in giving of pleasure and health, and I mean running. So then he goes on, and in a tiny little article, about 5 or 6 pages, to explain why a very simple light run in bare feet, basically, is one of the best things you can do every day to start your day. And it's like so good. It's like less than a mile. He takes a John Wesley was a famous English religious guy. I don't know. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No,
I think he started the Methodist. Anyway, his father told him when he went to London, every day I want you to go and run this, you know, some kind of like thing before you eat breakfast. And the guy did that his whole life, and he ended up living quite a long time and having, you know, a powerful experience. It was about 3/4 of a mile, okay? You don't need to go far and long to get that hygienic, quality, beneficial dose. And bare feet, learning how to just move, trot. In your bare, you're going to be breathing, you're going to be connected to the world, you're going to be outdoors, you're going to, dude, I want to tell people, I want to encourage people, something that simple is so good for you. And this guy, he writes this whole thing after studying all this therapy and everything else. It's like a little bit of sweating, a little bit of breathing, a little bit of touching the ground, a little bit of these stimulations through the feet. All of these things are tonic and good for you. And you know, I have to say, the dude's right. He did that for his whole life. He died, he only made it to 84. When I say only though, you know, something struck him pretty quickly. He died in his sleep. He was writing clearly, thoughtfully, deeply, connecting to people in his 80s. He's still working on things. He's 84. He's clear-minded. He's healthy. He's writing to Aldous Huxley and turning him on to another guy who ends up having, you know, it's like the guy was legit. He's the dude. So I want to be doing the same thing now. It's like the simplest thing I can tell people about wanting to find, what can I do? How can I? And what he says is, he goes, and this is what he says, so far as I know, no work on hygiene. Wait. Yeah.
As you find it,
Yeah.
it fills me with joy because and I don't want to blow my own trumpet on my own podcast, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it already. And it feels, of course, when I hear someone like you talk about it, I'm just like, of course, makes so much sense. But I feel like, yeah, I'm barefoot. I'm doing it. I'm it. I am it. I'm barefoot running every morning for like 3 kilometers. And that's all I feel I need. I don't time it. Nothing's on me apart from my shorts for social reasons.
Totally, dude.
If I can take my t-shirt off, I will try in the weather. But yeah, and that's, I feel like it's such a good, it just is. It's just the thing you do. It doesn't need to be anything else. It's like, it is the lifestyle.
So I dig that, and I dig that it's got this, I mean, it turns out, back to the idea that anytime that they're living in a human body, in this human world, will be finding similar things. They're going to be finding them. And that's just one of them. In other words, if you are not doing that now, in other words, trying to live in the modern world, which has so many benefits. Like, I am not a Luddite. I'm not trying to tear myself away from, I mean.
You're not living in a cave.
I mean, in other words, it's all in balance. In other words, if something isn't serving me, I will be hopefully mindful enough, or I'll notice it and I'll find a way to overcome it. But for so many people, the vast majority right now, the getting out of the doldrums of not even moving at all because they have some idea of how far they got to go, or some time or distance they've got to do, or some, I want to, we're just saying that isn't the first goal. If your goal is, I want to feel good in my body and my mind, and I want to come up with a strategy that I know works and also has underpinnings that will carry over into all these other areas that are important, breathing and sweating. You can do those other ways, by the way, but like breathing, I'm starting to realize breathing exercises, people who are getting more opportunities to learn how to, breathe, gets more oxygen, it's going to be so good. Opening what they call, many of the writers, there was this whole other movement in the US in this period up till the 1920s called New Thought. And they were sort of like they have a lot of wackadoo stuff, it goes all kinds of different places. But one lady in that movement, her name was Elizabeth Town, she really gets into breathing to help people, and like breathing from the solar plexus. And I've been, and other many, and every time that breathing is just everywhere. that calm, deep breathing, generally, let's say abdominal breathing. And I was even reflecting on it in when I lived in Japan. I did kendo, Japanese sword fencing, you know, where you have the kit on and you have like armor and everything else. One of the first things you learn is to face your opponent and learn how to breathe calmly through your center in the face of your own death. Learn how to do that. Then suddenly you can be effective in that position where, you know, and you might live instead. But if you're not calm in the most stressful, high dosage, crazy moments, that's where you want to practice being calm, because then it's like, you know, everything else seems a little bit, you know, you're, you know, breathing calmly in the face of your own death. You don't have to do that every moment of every day. But if you can, I mean, I guess you know, but being that calm, probably, and look, you can see how uncalm I can be. I mean, I get very worked up and then come back into it and boy, everything's fine again. It's like I pop back up after being hit by the wave of my own verbiage.
Let that one sit. I think it's not that you're not calm. I think it's you're passionate and you're vibrant and you've got energy to give to your credence to what you're speaking of.
I think that's the only, if there was a thing that I'd say it has to do, it must be something along the lines of at least we can give it that much, and I appreciate you acknowledging.
Brilliant, mate. This is valuable. It's very valuable, and it's also you deliver it in your own unique way through your experience, through everything you've come into contact with, and it's almost, sometimes you need to hear the same thing over and over again, said different ways, and then the one way will, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I think the way you talk of these things, it does hit, well, with me for sure, just does hit a spot which is different to the way I've heard it before, but it sinks in for sure. There's one thing, I think it's in the same chapter as in the Born to Run, that I wanted to bring up because I think it's a powerful statement. And it's about all we're talking about, really. It's what does it go like? It's the invention of the running shoe has, because we're a running species, no one can argue with that. It's how we got here. We are a running species. It's ingrained in us, hardwired in us all, and that is the magic bullet. If magic bullet to health, get out, go for a run. Has the running shoe stopped people from running? If the running shoe was never invented, because it was a technology, before that it was very minimal. It was very minimal. Before the running shoe was invented, that if it was never, I've gone a long way about saying this. If it was never invented, then would more people be running? Yeah.
You know, it's a very, you know, that question is a great one. It's fascinating to me. I mean, the book Born to Run goes deeply into that. That's, I think, chapter 25. It's like starts out, Barefoot Ted was right, of course. And that's where it has the Neil Armstrong and all this. And in that chapter, it's sort of, you almost get a sense of a conspiracy of like, you know, footwear was, I think that's a very, any kind of technologies for health can always have an element of, I mean, we just talked about medicine and other health practices, can always have an element of the inertia of whatever's working at that time. You know, I don't think, you know, the running shoe's gone through so many iterations and people are trying to, you know, and different kinds of technologies, and just footwear, as I mentioned, the natural selection of footwear throughout human culture, it plays so many different roles. I mean, it's just, it's endlessly inventive, and sometimes it's for function and sometimes it's for class, and sometimes, you know, what does it represent? The foot, when you look at the human foot, you know, some people are almost like aghast. It's almost like you're naked. Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting reasons for that, but in some sense, the foot really represents that primal part of yourself. It's untethered. It's not, it doesn't have a muzzle on it. Ooh, what can it do? And then of course, if it's not feeling well, or if it hasn't been taken care of, or if it's been wearing a muzzle all of its life, then it suddenly feels very, and it hasn't developed any robustness, or it must feel like this world is a terrible place and they evolved in the wrong place, or, but civilization likes to see it compartmentalized, and there's so much about class and position. And so, there was this one chart in the Aztec thing where different sandals would represent like your class. And the one that looks kind of like the Tarahumara simple sandal, that's like the bottom low class, right? That's like for, the people. But of course, going back to back to like this moment where, I'm with Manuel Luna there, and he's cutting me my first pair of LUNA sandals, or sandals that are that style, let's say. It started becoming more along the lines of, the best footwear ultimately for, if you want to look for high-tech footwear, the first most incredibly high-tech piece of equipment you have is your foot. It's an extraordinarily complex piece of equipment. And it seems to have made its way evolving over the course of eons on this planet with people in bodies much like ours. And it seems to be a good idea to first investigate its use without any admixture of anything, so that you kind of understand that it's an incredible piece of equipment. And until you know that, you might suspect that it's really a broken appendage that needs to be removed. Maybe a solid piece of rubber in a ball shape would be better. But when you begin to investigate this thing called your foot, and so many traditions, right away, anything that requires nuance of movement, tapping into deep thinking or deep breathing, or, you've got, from martial arts to yoga to many spiritual traditions, even Moses, take off your shoes, you are on holy ground kind of thing, is that foot and its interface with the world and its ability to move and feel and experience. If you take that away, you're taking away something that's been giving information and giving health to human beings from the beginning. I mean, so re-tapping into that was a good first part of my journey, but then realizing, well, but you still need something. You're going to go out into the world, sometimes you need something. You want to go further, you want to be comfortable. So what I started recognizing was so many footwear traditions that had stood the test of time were used by people who, it was one of the tools in their toolkit of survival, and it always paid homage to the foot first. It wasn't like designed to like, oh, the foot's broken, if I do this, that, or the other, I can make it better, this, that. Now, the one thing you can do to make a foot better, let's say in an environment that's either super cold or super hot or super, let's say, rough and dangerous, is to, how about some portable ground? Let the foot do everything it would normally be doing, splaying and moving and flexing and everything else, but at least give it an opportunity to have a place that it can land on that would allow it, that's such super basic technology. But it's pretty awesome. If you lived in a place where it was sort of like here in Joshua Tree, where there's things called like cholla cactus. I mean, I can move around in the desert barefoot, anyone can. But suddenly it's night, or suddenly you're in a hunt, or suddenly it really makes a difference. You can't have you'll come up with strategies. And so I got fascinated by the simple sandal and the fact that it popped up all over the world, so many different places, because it ended up fitting into that, and it's part of my philosophy. The simplest solution that works the best often is the best. It's the elegant solution that solves the riddle. Sandals for me became kind of like that, and that's why, and I often say, I have a sandal company called LUNA Sandals. We say we're like surfers making surfboards. I like the idea that a technology at one and the same time is offering something, but it's always paying homage to the embodied creature first. So like a surfboard, it's just a very basic platform. It doesn't do much. Throw it in a wave, it's add a human with a fully functioning foot. connected to their body, breathing and healthy, and suddenly you have a piece of equipment that could, basically, the early Hawaiians, if they could hop, there would be these waves were coming, these special horns were blown, surfers would come for the first big waves of the year, the king would be watching, and anyone who could ride a wave all the way across Waimea Bay would be considered a living deity. It wasn't easy to do. But if you could do that, you proved it. And I think in our daily lives, there you go. If you could just get yourself so that you could flow through that 3-kilometer run in such a way that it invigorated you, filled you, you're a living deity. And with the sandals, same thing as a surfboard. I love the idea we're trying to make a simple platform. It's very basic with some style and flair and all the rest, but ultimately its job is to, at one and the same time, inspire the person to, hey, be comfortable in your body, let your feet breathe and be, you need a modicum of, it's like that modesty. It's like your running shorts, a modicum of comfort and modesty, but ultimately you want to spend more and more time in your daily life in such a way that you're not cramped up and locked in and mashed and mushed, but instead more open and breathing. And indeed, I have a sandal company because that's what you do if you want to put that kind of thinking into footwear, and that's what I've done. So it's like my dream when I was a kid. I want to be a skateboard or a surfboard or a surf clothes manufacturer or something. I loved the stuff. And I realized those brands and those things, kind of like ideas, influenced me to, kind of become who I am. So I also see the importance, if you're going to make something or share something, or make sure that you like what you're making, you believe in what it is. These are kind of like that idea of find what makes you come alive and do it, because what the world needs are people who come alive. I came alive, and the thing for me is that Barefoot, and then just making that other platform, that magical platform, a sandal that is at one and the same time keeping you comfortable, keeping it simple, but also kind of playing as a talisman or a what they call smrti, reminding you to go out there and do that, and getting you to value that thing as something, as a tool that's going to help you to get that little dose that you need to keep you anyway, like that. I've been riffing on that that's I say what you do, your business, what you do is kind of like an externalization of your philosophy of life. I mean, ideally, right? So I'm very lucky because I feel really good about what I'm externalizing. Although I have to say, playing the game of business in the real world with real points and real people, woo, that's where you got to learn how to stay calm in the face of difficulty.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Trying to almost put a circle into a square or the other way around. It's things that aren't necessarily our natural nature playing that game. I do love the analogy of the surfboard, and almost the analogy allows people to perhaps change their perception of imagining that the shoes are your surfboard. Surfboard is just it's dormant, but you put it on, you get on the surfboard, you put your shoes on, and you can manipulate them if they're appropriate, if they're the right tool, and you can manipulate them, and it allows you to surf the waves. It allows you to go to different lands, goes to the cactus jungle and march around. It's beautiful.
And then back to kind of the surfboard analogy, people, I mean, in this case, the surfboards are Lunas, right? But the idea is people can, in that community now, because we've created an object that can be reduplicated and shared, this becomes kind of a tool, but people can also recognize through comrades and other people using this particular surfboard that, oh, look, he's got it, in other words, expanding their imaginative boundaries of what is possible by seeing other people do things, not as I'm trying to get away from, there's one aspect of, I don't want people to do anything that's leading them to be injured, hurt, broken, sorry, less vital, and everyone's got to find where that is for themselves. Because one part of my own trajectory was for me to validate what I was discovering, I wanted to push the envelope of what is possible. And it's a lot of fun. Like, what's the biggest wave I can ride? How far can I run? And all this. But that in and of itself isn't the lifestyle that's hygienic, right? Or that's going to give you the long-term benefit. It definitely is good to inspire yourself and to, if you're an athlete, to focus on what it is that you need to do in order to do what it is that you think will have the answer for you. And it's like, it's inspirational to imagine you're going to do a marathon or run a mountain, climb a mountain or surf a huge wave and all of that. And that's a whole nother, but what Barefoot Ted really, what I'm trying to is, what can we do to be able to develop ourselves in such a way so that if we want to go do something that's going to take more, you know, like climb a mountain or run a longer distance or surf a big wave or whatever, what are the things, the daily things that we should be doing that are actually, instead of breaking us down, are literally building us up? Doing big things break us down a little bit. I mean, go run 100 miles. I'm telling you, you don't want to do that every day. It's not a good idea. But being able to do it in a way that it doesn't break you and makes you stronger after you're doing it because you've done it, I'm really interested in things like that. And then the least amount, the dose that works, that daily part, in the end, the largest number of people ultimately can benefit from that right now today. They don't need to think that I've got to do the huge thing in order to fulfill. I mean, it's way better to find, how about just feel good today by just doing something that's so basic and so simple. That's going to be I want to find a way to encapsulate that message more. That's kind of like a personal target that I have right now, is I want to come up with a way to get more people. I mean, I know all the cool people who are doing all the cool things and already have, you know, mastered these basic things and are pushing the envelope. Maybe they need to come back to reminding themselves about that daily hygienic, just like, you don't need to overdo it. Maybe just calm it down a little bit. But the vast majority of people just see themselves as like not doing anything. I can't do anything. I'm all done. And I'm just saying, no, that's not true. And I think ultimately moving a little bit, and also stop poisoning the body with particularly, it seems, the thing that's just effing people up more than anything else are the simple carbs and sugars that just are bafflingly over consumed in our culture these days. And I'm telling you, you cannot save yourself if you fuel yourself with poison. Doing more work on the poisoned fuel isn't going to ultimately be a hygienic strategy. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some people, oh, I can do anything. I can eat anything. It's like, look, man, you got a brand new, beautiful, yada, yada car, and it's blah, 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 and needs this kind of fuel in order to run properly. If you fill that thing up with crap fuel and run it at higher speeds, poorly tuned, you're going to have a effed up vehicle in no time short. So get fuels. I mean, basically, I don't care what you eat as long as you are not filling your body with poison, whatever that is. And one thing's for sure, your body doesn't need a bunch of simple sugars, a bunch of simple carbs to hide such that if you didn't run whatever long distance you have to run, you would blow it up and become a giant balloon. Well, something's wrong, man. Mm-hmm. Don't do that.
Yeah, I think the way the sugar industry is still acting now is going to, in a couple of years, 10 years time, going to be exactly how we feel about the tobacco industry now.
Yeah, probably.
It feels very similar in terms of like where we're at still. Almost.
Well, they're already there. Look, that sugar and simple carbs are killing more people than anything ever devised by. And in the end, I'm not trying to say that I don't want people to have sugar, by the way. I mean, or whatever they want, for that matter.
Choice, yeah.
Yeah, choice. You know, because in the end, we don't know. It's hard, really, to say what. I mean, do you just? I mean, yes, I guess you could conceivably come up with some strategy, but what about the strategy of people just don't put that in their mouth?
Yeah, and largely people know. They know as well. So
So
it's
there's
almost,
an underlying psychological problem. You know,
it
in other
is
words,
psychological. It's
it's psychological.
trauma. It's emotional. Yeah. It's ingrained in that aspect. Trauma is a big part, like emotional eating and yeah.
Oh
But
my
it doesn't
God.
help when you go to the front of the shop and you wait in the queue and then everything around you is sugar.
Oh my God. One time I was in England, we stopped at a petrol shop, and it was just everything wrong was there ready. And, I had a guy who was in the
Cornered
car.
you.
He was a financial consultant, you know, and he helped people who were retiring to have their, but you know, have their retirement. And I said, do your people invest in these things, all these various packages? Oh, all of them. You know, and it's like, then you go into the shop and there's nothing, not a single, everything's like, it's like cheap politicians, every package, and there's like, me, vote for me, I'm the guy, you know. And in the end, everything at that petrol, from the literature that was being sold to the products that were being, there was nothing good there at all, zero. And yet, the whole society is invested in it so that they can retire. It's like, I mean, those kind of situations are just too absurd to be believable, but that is the situation we're in right now.
Mhm.
And I suggest voting with your body, what you put in it, what you do with it, where you go, what, you know, this is the only empowering vote. And it instantaneously changes the world for you.
Yeah.
So I tell people, Barefoot Ted says, vote for yourself. Don't poison yourself, as little as possible at least. Make sure you get out every day and get some outside time so that you breathe and maybe just sweat a little bit. And, you know, listen to cool podcasts like this so that you can remember that that's the best thing you can do for yourself anyway.
Yeah. And remember that you're human and you're an animal, and all animals operate in the same way, and you're no different.
No different. I'm telling you, the dog that gets locked in the house and gets fed crap food is going to be not going to
Yeah.
look like a happy, healthy animal, because it won't be.
Mm. Yeah. And also the almost like psychiatric diseases and illness that we have in our culture, the only other animals that experience that are the animals in a zoo.
I know, it's pathetic. Really. I think, by the way, I know, you know, one of the areas that I've also done, I mean, not extensively, but enough to realize that it has therapeutic value. And it goes back to that Howard Thurman guy. Remember I told you Howard Thurman, don't ask what the world needs, yada, yada. So he's this incredible thinker and whatnot. He is the dude who in 1962, an experiment carried out called the God experiment, or the Marsh Chapel experiment, by a Harvard researcher, where he takes 20 theological students and puts them in a chapel in Boston University. 10 get psilocybin, 10 get a placebo, and then they follow them for the next 25 years, okay?
Yeah.
Howard Thurman is the one who okays that to be at his chapel. He gives the talk that day.
Oh, wow.
And the ramifications of what came from there, talking about trauma, are coming out at Johns Hopkins University and other places where psychedelic research is back. And it's back because of things like this experiment that happened in 1962, where people started getting, and I've been sort of like paying attention to that. And I believe that we have, there's so many right now, some of these modern societies, yours and mine both, are bankrupt when it comes to medicine and food, basically. And the therapy world is, you know, there's a lot of people who need therapy in various ways, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever. And it seems to me that the likelihood that solutions will not be coming because of some grand hierarchical program, because not everybody's the same. And I think decentralized and free choice environments are way better for finding solutions, because there's no one solution. But for sure, many people listening out there today on your podcast will probably have already experienced or be recognizing the value of having experiences that allow them to temporarily recognize, reconnect, get a glimpse of the fact that there's no lack in the universe of solutions. There's a superabundance of goodwill and good intentions out there. There's some kind of way of tasting that in a way that is palpable and unforgettable, that all the research shows that people who've had those kind of experiences, and Lloyd was one of them, by the way, this guy that I'm talking about, in another, not from a particularly, I mean, it's not always a psychedelic, but psychedelics are a unique tool in the toolkit of modern, let's say, psychonauts to many times, more often than not, in the right set and setting for the right purposes, doing way, way more good and helping people deal with trauma, with other therapies, whatever, better than any of the, let's say, therapeutic pharmaceutical tools that I've been noticing or I've heard about in the more recent history. Just taking things that dull the mind or remove the problem without it actually being gone, probably not the best way.
Yeah,
some kind of radical. So I sort of noticed that in my little bit of research on your background, that probably at the very least you recognize that there are benefits that come from those kind of experiences too, and maybe you've even had some benefits yourself. So I could say for me, definitely.
I had some benefits the other night. It was very good.
Okay, there you have it. See?
There was a full moon out, and yeah, we explored some benefits. Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
So, and look at how fascinatingly we can across the planet connect, resonate, and share. I am, my 6-year-old me did see an interesting world. Let's try to make it better. And you know what? Things can get better very, very quickly in a grassroots way when individuals find something that starts working for them. Yes. And each and every time people are happier and healthier, they are instantaneously better and more adept at solving the problems that we're riddled with in today's world, not as problems, but as new opportunities. And suddenly we'll go, what were we even thinking about? What was the big scare? For example, when it comes to viruses or sickness. Well, when you're vital, let me tell you, you don't go outside fearful that there's going to be some kind of bacteria, virus, or toxin that's going to get to you if you're vital. You just don't even give it. It's not, it's not something you have to be worried about, in this level. Of course, hygiene, keeping yourself clean, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these are basics. So there you have it. Don't be scared, kids.
It's interesting. Like everyone I know who's in an intimate relationship with their own health and a seeker of their own health in this modern day, in this disconnected world, everyone in that space shares the same thought as me, and that the central narrative isn't really about health. Like we know what it is to be healthy and to seek that proper health, and it just doesn't seem to be there, and it makes your mind wander into these ways. And I could talk about what you said about the psychedelics and the reason there's been a revolution, because these things heal, they stop other things happening, and for a prolonged amount of time. That's why MAPS are doing amazing work in over in America, like with MDMA therapy, which, if you look into the history, what was his name? Sasha Shulgin. He and it was in Stealing Fire, which I also resonate with the mushroom in the church. That was in there as well. And the MDMA, this is psychoassisted therapy. Like, it's proving to work, which nothing else that we've got has. So surely we should be looking into that, and also ask questions like, why is this not available? What's the real reason it was not available?
There is I spend as little time as possible conveying or imagining the world the way the people, the cynics, the fear mongers, the politics, there's a whole host of people that apparently, why is it that more of us haven't become healthier and happier? Why is it that we're held back? And we just talked on it. There's kind of an element of our traumas, and there's, the traumas of even the world we've been born into. It's a very complex problem. But why is it that, how is it that the world's going to become a better place? I don't think it's going to be any of these grand, tectonic political structures that end up, just telling everybody what to do and everything will be fine kind of situations. That doesn't seem to work, and solutions that aren't really beneficial. Even the best intentions end up sometimes being just god awful. There's just so many. But if individual, I think keeping open lines of communication and letting people do like what we're doing now here is probably ultimately can give us the greatest amount of hope that more and more people, as I think already has been the case to some degree, I'm sure, that more and more people just start finding out the solution that works for them and are courageous enough to follow through. And those who don't, pay the consequences. The consequences is as you live your life in fear. And so much of, unfortunately, the power structures of the world seem to resonate and use the tool of fear far, far too much to get anything and everything done for masses of people. It seems to be a great tool for that purpose. But nothing good comes from enacting yourself in fear, basically. It's ignoble to act out of fear, even if you have something to be fearful of. It's a good idea to learn how to face it fearlessly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That fear thing, you stop breathing, you start getting, isolated and contracted, and I spend every day of my life making sure I'm doing things that remind me not to be in that state, including averting my eyes and averting my ears from the fearmongers. I get as small a dose of those people as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at its most basic level, when you are in fear, science inhibits your ability to process and think and problem solve. Just basic. So surely that's something you don't want to be in, right? You don't want to be in that state.
Don't watch the telly, just turn on the podcast. Come
on. Amazing, mate. I think we'll leave it there because we've delved into a lot, and I think we've rounded it off really nicely as well. This is valuable, mate. You've inspired me. I want to go out for a run. I want to eat some good food and listen to some good music and dance and do the good nourishing things.
Dude, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to hang out with you. Cool. It's been a pleasure. I hope that whoever's listening out there, that you, hopefully you got something good out of this. You're empowered to practice anything we've shared, at least anything I've shared. Go for it. Let us know the results.
Yeah, for sure. And one final thing, how do I get my hands on some Lunas?
That's a great question. LUNASandals.com is our website, and we are shipping all over the world. We are working. This past year was quite. We grew quite a bit over the course of the last 10 years. We're a 10-year-old company now. Lots of other companies. We're kind of like the instigators of that space of the sort of the simple sandal, and we're fine. We worked so hard to make our own, and we still do. But we grew way too fast overseas, particularly in Japan and Taiwan and other places. So we got lucky, and we have a Japanese company, a third-generation Japanese family footwear company that has places all throughout Asia, very high quality, do other famous brands. They're making for Asia and eventually for the world so that we can start actually supplying a demand where they've reduplicated some of our best sandals. So we now have a place to scale. What I didn't say, we grew and grew for almost 10 years, and then our wholesale business was growing and growing. And then we did some research last year and found out that we had been basically losing money on every sandal that we sold wholesale overseas. And we had grown at 25% 2 years in a row. So we were basically looking at growth in revenues and loss of money. Oh my God, that was the big wave that crashed on top of me, man. Woo! So I came back up, and we're looking good, and I'm you know, I'm very proud of my company and what we do. And if your listeners ever get intrigued by them, I would suggest give them a try, and maybe eventually we can come up with something to share with your podcast family, some kind of little discount or something. I mean, we're just trying to run our business, but the goal now there with a sandal is this is a chance to like make something palpable that is worthy that you can use as part of your practice kind of concept. That's the sort of, you know, it's just another one of those. But what Lloyd says, what I was going to try to read, but I'll just have to tell you from memory, is something like what he finds in running, particularly this like simple running, is this idea that without apparatus and without assistance, you can do this now. That's what that little trot, a mile, quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile, done in a way that you're breathing and feeling good, and it's so good. More is fine, you know, go ahead. But it's such an easy bite to take and to integrate into your lifestyle that if anything, that is what I want your listeners today to remember. Just make sure every time, you know what I'm talking about, Chris, when it's like every time it ends up basically serving its purpose. It ends up, if you could just get those wheels rolling, you're going to feel good for it. So that's what Barefoot Ted's about. That's what LUNA Sandals about. Thank you for letting me tell the story.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And you can send me over a picture of the article or something. I can put it in there.
Oh, I will. I'll do it.
Sure. All right, mate. Thanks very much.
Thank you, amigo. Great talking with you.
Bye-bye.